What's going on, guys? Coach Gaglione here is another edition of the Powerlifting with the People podcast. I'm your host, Coach Gags, and we got Greeno on the line today. How you doing?
Going on, guys? How are you?
So, if this becomes a regular segment, where I think we might have to call it Gags and Greeno rants or something like that, and then we can give Heidi the royalties every time we say it. So,
There's it. She's stirs up all kinds of stuff wherever she goes.
but for those that maybe aren't familiar with you, just quick background: who you are, what you got going on right now.
Yeah. Where to start? I'm kind of a nobody. I'm all really known for my track suits, just kind of the random old guy that walks around, pro-ams and upper level meets and stuff in a tracksuit and like kind of points my fingers and yells at judges. Uh, that's about probably what I'm known for lately. Not really. I'm a high level coach. I've been doing this for like 15 years or so, give or take. I've coached multiple record holders. Probably the most notable thing I'm probably known for um, is that, three of the top 15 all-time totals in raw powerlifting uh, basically have kind of come through my stable, people that I have directly coached. Uh, and then more controversially, probably coached Husam during
Yeah,
his month and a half terror
yeah.
of the 242 squat
Well,
record.
I think not to we can go back to that because I do think judging standard is definitely was something on my radar to talk about for you specifically because I have probably not I probably have not so popular opinions on like where the standard should go and I think potentially speaking about like the standard at ABS is a good kind of those are kind of two maybe yin and yang of two sides of the coin potentially. But yeah, so really quick, and I'm not even sure if you're aware of this or not. So you've been on my radar for a while, but where I really started to kind of follow you was your kind of early days with Zach Myers, and
Yeah.
because Zach took one of my guys, Larry Wheels' record, and some people have certain maybe have certain feelings. I think it's cool. I like to kind of see like who is kind of the successor and who kind of so I was it was more of I was happy for Zach and I've met Zach and then especially when he was still part of kind of this mid-Atlantic kind of region and got to see that record got broken in person at the Bear Cave I believe and
Mhm.
so that was kind of cool just to kind of witness I was kind of had a hand, and I don't know how you feel about this stuff too. Cause at the end of the day, the athlete does the work, but I had a hand in like having, seeing the record kind of get pushed up to a certain level, and then kind of seeing Zach, kind of move it up a few notches, which was cool. So, anyways, that was kind of like my. I started kind of following you a little bit more closely at that time, and it was cool to see how Zach has progressed over the years. And I always like to see. It's always interesting to kind of see how certain athletes kind of conduct themselves and their demeanor. And I always appreciate like, just how Zach is as a person, like outside of powerlifting. So I just wanted to, share that little tidbit with you as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's crazy. So Travis Rogers coached Zach for a really long period of time. Um, and I give that credit because, the foundational thing, Zach coached himself for a really long period of time, and then he worked with Travis, and then he came to me. So there was such a huge foundation there,
Yeah.
and I'm a type of coach where, yeah, I will influence those. And when it comes to credit, taking credit is kind of a weird thing for me.
Yeah. I agree.
I I will never touch another person's summit, but I will guide them to that, right? And then one of the common things I ripped off from the movie Ford versus Ferrari is I can only promise the drive, not the win, right? That's my stance on it. I'll get you prepared. It's up to you to take that step, right? I'll get you to the summit. It's your job to touch it, right? I'll go back down. I'm like, good job, dude. High five. And I'll go up there many, many times. It's not my place, right? It's kind of a philosophy thing. Like you look at like Sherpas and on Everest, they never touch it. It's part of their belief system. They don't touch the summit. That's reserved for that's it's sacred ground. Now they've probably touched it on their own accord, but they've never really done it in the service of another person because they feel it's disrespectful. So I kind of stick myself there. It's like, yes, I've coached people to these accolades, but I'll never claim it as my own, if you will. So
Yeah, and then I'll just kind of throw my 2 cents too. So if I'm kind of speaking about goal setting and stuff, because I do a lot of, I think you said you do some mentoring as well. I've done we have an internship program at our original location in Farmingdale, so we've had a lot of coaches and trainers kind of come through our system. Um, some are probably most well known. You have like Nick Benarakis, Bench and Benny. He's a really good single ply lifter now. Used to be part of. He kind of flipped it the other way. He was part of the dark side and then went to the light side. So he had like an 820 multiply bench when he was kind of with us, and then now he's doing really well in single ply. He's probably knocking on like a 700 single ply bench now in the USAPL. But
wow.
anyways, one of the things, yeah. So he's doing great things, and he's got like his own business and doing well. And anyways, so what I kind of explain to our coaches, like in terms of like I kind of view myself as like the GPS. If you're like kind of, and then at the end of the day, the GPS is going to provide directions, and the GPS is going to recognize if there's roadblocks, if there's traffic, but it's up to the driver to kind of actually listen to those directions. If you've ever kind of
Right.
used it. So at the end of the day, the driver gets to themselves to the destination, and kind of the GPS or the coach is kind of like consult and lend advice, but it's up to the lifter to do the work and kind of see, and then hopefully the GPS will adjust for different circumstances and roadblocks and traffic and all these sorts of things. And the more you kind of travel that road, like you said, the more kind of insight that you potentially have, and maybe you have a shortcut or you have a trick up your sleeve or two. But at the end of the day, it's the lifter's kind of job to kind of get there. And in terms of my own language, I even like to I try to catch myself in how I talk because I know, and again, this is nothing wrong with it, but instead of saying like my client or my athlete, I might say they're a team member or they're part of the team, and I kind of and I just try to I don't know. I just feel like it's more of a collective effort. And like you said, we talked about crews a little bit off air, and there's so much that kind of goes into someone's like success, and it's not just any like one person,
Right.
especially for those top level lifters, the training partners, um, the spotters, the loaders. There's so many things that have to kind of come together for an all time record or like a big performance. So I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add to that, but I just wanted to kind of share my kind of thought process on, maybe like how I view the coaching role, in a sense. So,
Yeah. And I think there's some really interesting things to this. I think we've had some conversations in the past. I made a post about the Kentucky Derby and how those horses kind of thing. I think you replied to it some at some point. And you and I are no strangers to people of just great ability. You coaching Larry and oh, man, and that guy was it, right? Like that guy was it. He was,
yeah,
John was on the come up and all this other stuff. It was just like there was no ceiling for that man.
yeah,
And so, and then that's indicative of your what I refer to as a stable, right? If you think about a stable, like a horse stable for like performance horses, or typically it's a trainer, right? It's a well-known, well-renowned trainer, and people come from all over the world with their horses to bring to this stable, say, hey, help me improve this horse, help me do this thing. And ultimately they're in service of those people. Those people are going to claim like the overall accolades, but that's a Gaglione lifter. That's a Greeno lifter, right? Like your name's gonna get stuck to it. And if but the funny thing is about the Husam thing, it just kind of I had a number of people, they're like, that's only gonna ruin your name.
that's interesting.
And I'm like, but is it? But the thing is but that's the thing, right? Right? Do you really want that attached to who you are, right? And it's kind of synonymous. It's like what comes from your proverbial stable, right? And so we all have these kind of acknowledgments, and you're right, it's kind of like a team, but it's also this living and breathing entity because it's a system that you create within yourself, even though like there's so many different tools to do it. But you start the type of people that comes through your purview is starts becoming a little bit of your identity and how you're associated. And that's kind of like how I've been known, because it's just like I've been this turnstile for the best in the world for since 2018, 2017, right? It's just it's weird. I never expected it to be that way, but here we are, you know.
Yeah, I want to continue the kind of the coaching conversation because I think it's just also interesting to me. I do want to at some point, if hopefully one of us will get back on track, but I do want to touch on the judging stuff because I think that's important to maybe unpack for the sport itself in terms of having certain standards and legitimacy and all these things. But so when you are, I guess, working with some of these people, some are so I'll just again just using just because I like to use Larry a lot just because people know him, and sometimes I'm like, should I? I feel like kind of a broken record, but I think people, they kind of understand, what his accolades are and what he did. So he was in a really unique situation with me personally because a lot of people don't know he was a homegrown guy. Like I started working with him at 19. So on one hand, I also think that says a lot about like he was at like a 1900 total, um, like with no. So a little quick backstory. I think you'll appreciate. So we actually had first connected. We had Stan Efferding come to our gym, and it was we had a seminar in quotations. It was like Q&A, and then it's like, do you guys want to lift weights after? you know, it was awesome. So at the time, I was actually training for a deadlift only competition, and I had already deadlifted twice that week, but I got to lift with Stan, right? I have to lift with Stan. So Stan was there. The first time I met Larry. Kevin Oak was in his prime at the time, so we had Kevin Oak. I don't know if you ever rubbed elbows or corresponded with Dom Minichi. He's kind of since retired, but he did a naked knees for a while. He was a 900-pound sleeved guy. He's a
Yeah.
so Dom Minichi was one of my old training partners. A lot of people may or may not know, and we lifted on and off together for about 10 years. I helped him to his first 2,000-pound total. And then eventually he went, on to, do other things on his own and did great. So anyways, in that room, and then we had Creed, I don't know if you knew Creed. I don't even know his real name, but one of
Creed
Stan's friends.
Childress. Yeah,
Yeah,
Creed Childress.
Creed Childress. So in that room, there was like multiple like 700 plus deadlifters. Well, maybe like in 2025, that doesn't seem that impressive, but at the time, this is like 2014, 2013. So it was a strong room. So at the time, I ended up, I think at the time, maybe my PR for deadlift was like 640 or something like that, 650, probably 640. So we're working up because of course, so I ended up hitting 660. It moves really well, and I'm like, man, there's only one place to go. So I ended up hitting my first 700-pound deadlift in training. I was pretty happy with it. And then this 19-year-old kid from the Bronx, walks up to the bar with no technique at all, just yanks it and does it not once, not twice, but three times. And I'm just like, and I've been at the time so my first meet was 2006. Um, so this is like, almost 10 years into like training and competing, for powerlifting. And I'm just like, what the hell did I just see? And then to make things even crazier, Stan's got to, show the young buck who's boss. So he does a set of four just just to do one more than Larry. So that was my introduction to Larry Wheels. And then eventually we got linked up. We did a lot of training in person. He was kind of part of that crew. So it was Larry Wheels, Dominici, Black Tom Cruise, rest in peace. Um, this guy Mark Greenstein, he had an 1825 total at 198, which would still be very competitive now. He was fifth in the world at the time. So we had a lot of homegrown guys. And Larry is one of them. So anyways, it's just really interesting so you have someone like that. And one of the things that I learned, and I'm curious like what your take is, when Larry started to really kind of make a lot more progress was when I started treating him like how I would just treat any other 19-year-old kid that's just starting out. And I stopped worrying about like where his numbers are, this guy's going to be hit a world record. And I just like, what is this guy like? What is the bottlenecks in his training? What are the technical problems? So, anyways, that's kind of how I approached him, and that worked really well. And then over time, the more you spend with someone, as you know, like you just kind of figure out what they need, what their tendencies are, where they're weak, what they need on game day. So, anyways, it's just I like to tell that story because I think it's different. like you kind of mentioned with Zach, he already had kind of a little bit of experience and kind of coaching, and he had a foundation. So I'm just kind of curious, like when you're getting someone new versus kind of, I guess, building someone like, with that's a clean slate, what your approach is when you start working with someone, like what does that look like? So that was just a
Yeah,
kind of like a little, background and insight on.
yeah. So I am in the same situation in a weird way. Now he's not 19. Now I got a couple of kids, and I worked with a couple of kids that started when they were 12 years old. One of my well, we parted ways. He's a kid,
Yep.
they're so always so short-sighted, right? So I held this kid as a baby, right? He's a friend of mine's kid. He started powerlifting at 12. By 17, he was squatting mid fives, benching in threes and pulling close to six, on power bar. Kid just looked limitless, got a scholarship. He does other things now, and he that trains out of the same gym, and they do all coaching and stuff together. But um, when I found Devontae Lewis, right? So Devontae Lewis is this new guy that came onto the scene. No one knew who he was. I found him in a Globo gym. I was like, "Hey man, you might be good at this." And what do you mean? You think my mom will come? You think my mom will come watch? You know? And I'm like, "Yeah, bud. I think your mom would probably want to see this." Be the he's the first person to ever squat 1,000 in his first meet. He has the biggest subtotal all time in his first meet. Right? He came to me and he was super squirrely. Like he didn't squat it. He squatted like 750 for 3 or 4, naked knees, no belt, never used any of that stuff. He was a college football player and a cheerleader, and he benched 600. So I mean, he was probably a 2,200 pound lifter just off the street, right? And I always tell people this from a coaching aspect: the best coaches in the world are probably good for about 10%, right? So they're good for about 10%. And so if you can, over time, period, stuff like that, like their natural progression will always be their natural progression, but you can influence that 10% of all out pure talent and strength, and wrangle it in and kind of catch lightning in a bottle, if you will. And it's kind of a good segue into standards and judging to that point, because Devontae knew nothing. He knew nothing about powerlifting. He knew nothing about depth. He knew nothing about ankle mobility. He knew nothing about pausing a bench. He only put touch and go. Like he just shoved. That's what he did. His whole thing in college was to throw 110 pound, you know, little humans through the stratosphere. And if you like his close friends, he'll post some of his things. And it's just him, like just kind of just if he would actually just go out, he would have vaulted some of these young ladies like through the ceiling. They did not register his weight to him. And he never deadlifted. He never deadlifted a day in his life. To going to his first meet and pulling it's a very sketchy 804. It was a gift, but it was, and we talked about standards. We talked about the fundamentals, and kind of like what you touched on is no matter their strength level, and this is where I'm currently at now, no matter their strength, they are still infants. They still need to learn to stand. Still need to learn to walk and before they can run, right? They need to know the good, the bads, and the difference. They need to know their standards. They need to know what's expected of them so they're not hitting a moving target. We just happen to get lucky, you and I, to find a person who is
Yeah,
extraordinary.
just kind of like stumbled across, like, and then yeah,
But the formula is no different than a person with a 500 pound total as opposed to a 2440 total or a 1900 pound total, right? We know, you and I know that they're going to go on to be probably one of the greatest in the world and the greatest to ever do this. We know that. There's the burden that's placed upon us as coaches to know that we have to be patient. We got to do this right
yeah,
because we don't want to break our new shiny toy, right? We can jump on that horse's back and ride it like Zorro, or we can give it the time it needs and give them the perspective to understand that This is about a long game and about doing this right and doing it to a level of quality and standards that's honestly something that you can be happy with because this sport is notoriously bad for being a wood chipper to people. It's the hottest stars burn out the fastest, and you're kind of left with things. So judging and standards, it's like you have to teach that. And like I taught that to Devontae, and it's like, hey, like you're not going to get away with high squats here. Even we did a local meet, you're not going to get away with that. Like I I train these judges. Me and JP Price, who JP, if you know JP, he's incredibly well known for squat depth. Probably one of the deepest super heavy squatters ever to do it.
For sure.
Him and Jesus are probably the two most decorated deep squatters at that to squat over 900 pounds, and even 1,000. JP took 1,025 or 1,003 and just dunked it, and it's one of those types of things. So it's like we have like our judging core in Kansas City to be explicitly for that. So because we take pride in that, right?
So I
And
want so I
so
want
yeah.
to pause the judging thing. So there's because some of these things are related, but I definitely want to start to shift the conversation towards the judging standards. So you talked about the wood chipper, and it's funny because that was kind of one of the things I wanted to kind of also touch on. So this is just more again. I'm gonna share some of my personal opinions, bias, experience. So like part of when I kind of got into lifting in the early 2000s. West Side's very prominent. Chuck Vogapol, first 1,000 pound squat. Like that's the kind of stuff that I grew up watching, and I was super like enamored with as someone that was a little bit more of a shy kind of kid that didn't really kind of belong and stuff like that. And that's kind of like what I wanted. I wanted to kind of get a little bit more of that for myself. I think build more confidence, build more strength, and um, anyway, so that type of training with that was more variation, higher intensity, lower frequency, lower volumes for the most part, maybe not on the accessories. That was kind of like what was in vogue and what was kind of popular at the time. So I took a lot of influence from Louis and those guys, and learned from many others over the years. And we kind of have like I kind of take from as much as I can. And what I've kind of noticed, especially on like kind of the tested side, but just generally, I've seen a lot more attention to frequency, specificity, mainly only using the straight bar, not so much accessory work, and that, and I think also potentially with a combination of standards, which we can kind of get into. I just kind of like wonder because we're seeing all these unbelievable like performances at like the sub junior and junior level. Um, Are we just maybe accelerating their progress and they're going to burn out faster, or like what are the downstream effects? What are the long-term effects for what these younger lifters are kind of doing? And is there going to be are they going to be able to sustain that, or are they going to kind of get out of the sport sooner? So I'm just kind of curious if that's like something that you've kind of thought about, or are there kind of measures that you personally take to try to also keep your athletes healthy, especially for the ones that are kind of doing the biggest absolute poundages? Because I know I've kind of found the stronger the athletes get, you have to be like more careful with, the dose of these heavy exposures, especially. And then also like, if you're doing like and I've seen some of the questions that we've had, we use things like chains and stuff like that, maybe to potentially offload some of the, the bottom position maybe for different reasons. But I know one of the reasons also like to do it from a recovery standpoint. So I know there's like a lot there, but I'm just kind of curious, like your thoughts on how powerlifters are kind of training now, and then maybe are there any potential downstream effects? Like if you had to, I know obviously some of this is speculation, but so what are your thoughts like on that?
So let's talk about it. Let's talk it at the high level, right? Let's talk it in this. I got this running theory, and I share it with people. So I'll share it here. Let's talk about power bar feds, right? Let's talk about the IPF. Let's talk about power bar feds, but let's dial it down into 800 plus pound squatters, right? So, and let's kind of go back in time a little bit and talk about a lifter named Blaine Sumner and Carl Yngvar Carlson,
It's
right?
good examples. Yep.
Great squatters, right? Great squatters, great lifters, generational talents out of the sport probably a little bit before their time. Carl was only 24,
He was really young. Yeah, really young.
permanent back injury, right? And then you look at Blaine, the back part of his career, other than him almost chopping out off his wrist with an ER rack. Um, he was the dog. Like he was it. He was the IPF lifter. He would lift in open nats and squat 900 in a pair of sleeves and then go squat 1,000 plus in single ply, right? Self handoff 900 plus pounds on bench, but then started and toward the back end of his career started fighting nagging low back injuries, L1, L4, L5 compression fractures, you name it. Like he was fighting that, right? Fast forward to Ray Williams. Ray Williams breaks record, comes on again, paces through lower back injuries, right? So fast forward to Jesus, and you look at that and you're like, okay, well, you could add JP Price in there because his back injury, but his was squat bar. But then you
Well,
have
it's funny you
a
say about JP because I remember there was one meet that I think it was like a early iteration of the Kabuki squat bar, but it was very whippy on a
2018 Kern when he couldn't
2018
stop
current.
it.
It was he yeah, it was acting like a power bar.
That was still to this day. We and JP talked about this last night. The best warm up room ever to be in this room because it was Brandon Allen, Larry, JP, Dennis Cornelius took a
That
article
was
steam
yeah,
ban.
we might have to have a tangent conversation
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
yeah. That was by far. Anyway, so but fast forward, you have Jesus kind of starting to deal with some back injuries. Rondell Hunt just pulled out of
He's been
the
beat up too.
because
Yeah.
of a spondylosis, like a lower back injury. And my theory on this is that I've used this data, kind of compiled it. It's like it's the power bar.
That's
The power bar, the
denominator.
common
Yeah.
denominator is over 800 pounds. It starts stressing the bar and it starts flopping, right? There's only one way, only one place where that potential energy and that oscillation goes. It just goes down through your spine. It's got to get to the ground somehow. So it's going to go through your spine. So you have these lifters lifting so much heavy weight with frequency method because natty lifters do that. It's all frequency method. JP was basically all but natty. Like as an untested lifter,
Right.
it would blow your mind how like little he
Yeah.
took. And so, but like with Devonte and how I work with him is we don't work that power bar often. We're going to go to a power bar fed and we're going to do it in isolated. I had him on like that CB4, the big rogue CB4 strongman
Yeah.
duffel
Yeah.
bar.
Yeah.
That thing won't move with 200. It won't even flex with 200, 2,000 pounds on it. It's huge. He's a big guy. I don't want him, and we don't really even touch much over like we when we do our volume, it's in the sevens, low eights. We only go start ascending up until like the high eights and nines when we need to. We stay out of altitude as much as we possibly can, right? So when it comes to these things, is there's diminishing returns on those levels of training, right? And how I look at a lot of my lifters, I run a lot of submax. And it honestly makes a lot of my clients not happy because they don't feel like they're progressing. And then I'm like, okay, go max out. And they're like, I hit a PR. I'm like, see, you don't have to lift heavy weight. It's enticing. It's your shot of adrenaline, but it doesn't have to be there. Now, max effort method has its place,
Yeah.
but I'm working with one of my clients now, Zach's wife. I have her working max effort method on her deadlift. But I'm not saying max out every week on a single.
Yeah.
She had a max four. She had a max three. I'll probably have her do a max double next week, but that'll be the lowest we go until we actually need to do a single, and that'll be more, you know, controlled. Right. So I try to control like the overall state of being, and I keep people kind of, we all know the whole training max thing. I think we've lost a lot, like a lot of the natty lifters today, and a lot of those high specificity, high frequency lifters have lost the sight of their training max. And that's why you see them grinding and getting hurt and stuff like that. They're not tapering it down 10% and saying you need to go off of your everyday max,
Yeah.
not your absolute max. Right. And that's kind of where I work, even with Devonte today. I'm like, we're not he could squat 1050 tomorrow if I asked him. I'm not even joking. He could. He squatted 945 off the cuff. He just did it. He's like, I don't want to squat today. I'm like, okay, what do you want to do? I said, oh, let's do something heavy, a triple. Like, what do you think? He's like, I'm thinking like 930, 940. I'm like, okay. Like, how bonkers that sounds. And the week before, all I did was squat 749 for a set of five. So it's just like you don't always have to do it. It's just it may feel a little weird and uncoordinated, but you'll be fine. The natty lifters don't have the same constraints that say an untested lifter does. My untested lifters, I work sub max because there's timings to it, right? They're not as strong as they are on meet day ever, right? Like when they're in prep, you titrate them up, right? But when they're like off season, they're not nowhere near as strong as they are when they're on, like on meet day. So sometimes it can be like 20% less. Their training max is 20% less than like what they are on, especially like when you have females that are on tested because they don't, have to go through certain protocols, blast cruise protocols, et cetera, right? They're natty or they're not. So, so you control the weights by what they can do and what they're capable of, but that sometimes to them that doesn't really always connect. So, it's kind of a Rubik's cube sometimes because you have to kind of dial that in and they're like they get into themselves. They're like, I'm not really strong. I'm like, okay, well, we will be, I promise. When we get back to where we're going, we'll be fine. But the natty lifters, the high specificity, high frequency, I think it's what they see the top people doing.
Yeah. So
There's
do you think
there's no
it's
other reasoning for that.
yeah, I
There's
was
no
saying,
other.
do you think it's more like monkey see, monkey do than or there's more? Yeah, you think that's like the
All one
correct
has to do is
concept?
look at CrossFit. All training protocols that derive from CrossFit came from the Olympic weightlifting teams. It came from Dmitry Klokov, came from
Right.
the number of people like, oh, I have to do that. It's like, oh, do you now? Or could you do these other things? And me and Devonte and our training crew, we kind of joke about how the moment he breaks the squat record, we're just going to shake up training in natty powerlifting as you know it. Because everyone's like, well, you're using change, you're using this, you're using SSB, you're using a cambered bar. You're like, and then of course Heidi being in that equation, she's like, West Side works for Raw. She wants to say that.
Sure, sure. Yeah, no, that's there's a lot of people, including myself. I think like that was I got a lot of pushback even when Larry was I mean, I think part of it also too when you're if you're working with a lifter like you said that's in your stable, now you have more eyeballs on you, so there's going to be more criticism potentially that comes with that. One of the things I'll just kind of throw out there too that I think one of the strategies that we would do often with Larry because he was a very fast and is a very fast twitch lifter.
Oh yeah.
We would open very light, and he would really only take like 6 hard attempts because that's what we found worked best for him. And a lot of
Mhm.
people would like poo-poo like, "Oh, this is stupid," he doesn't know what he's doing. But it was just like it was a strategy that was kind of agreed on, and also part of it was also um, that's what he was comfortable making a 100-pound jump, going from like a 700-pound squat to an 820 pound, whatever it was, and then we would take a more reasonable jump from second to third. And then also a lot of times too, when you have a very fast twitch lifter like that, sometimes like, oh, is this person sandbagging? Is this person, oh, that was easy? And it's like, oh, it's like anyone could have handled him, but it's like you don't see the little idiosyncrasies and changes in bar speed, and maybe there was a micro like flexion in his upper back that has to be accounted for, and maybe another 10 kilos that he would have got stapled. Um, anyway, so there's just like a lot to consider when you're dealing with, like you said, if you have a lifter that's dealing with an 365 400 kilo plus lift, you have to be a little bit more calculated. I think the margin for error becomes like smaller and smaller, like the heavier the absolute poundage is. If you have 1,000-pound squat and you're off you know a quarter of an inch, like that's not that's gonna be a disaster. So the other thing I wanted to outside of like the programming and the power bar and stuff like that. So this is also another kind of thing that I think that is worth noting. So like obviously this kind of raw is still like a relatively new phenomenon and sector of lifting. And up until, I don't know, 2012 to 2015, maybe when things started to really kind of pop off. I don't think we had a lot of data in terms of like the lifespan of, like you said, these 800, like up until now is mostly single ply equipped, whatever. Um, Even some federations, if you put on knee wraps on, they considered that single ply. The raw with wraps wasn't really a thing.
Sure.
So you kind of mentioned, we saw lifters like Brandon Lilly, ended up kind of having some injuries out of a combo rack. We saw, obviously you mentioned Blaine Sumner, hip and lower back issues. JP Price, I know he's had some hip surgeries. So one of the things that like, and we can kind of get into the combo rack too, but one of the things with like the standard that I'm a little bit like not sure like what the answer is when you have these absolute poundages and lifters are kind of, it seems like the standard is just getting more stringent depending on like what fed, and you're being asked to take 1,000 pounds an inch deeper. Like
Yeah.
what are the ramifications of like a Blaine Sumner having to take 900 pounds an inch lower at an IPF meet? What are the ramifications of JP Price walking out a whippy bar on a stage and having to dunk 1,000 pounds? So these are things that I'm also thinking about. Like we want to preserve the integrity of the sport, but also like have a standard that's okay. This is like reasonable, but also it's not at the cost of maybe the lifespan with a career.
Mhm.
So these are just things. Even how long you're pausing and stuff like that. How straight does your knee need to be in a deadlift? How erect do you need to be in a deadlift? So these are things is going to be extra stress in the spine. So just I think some people may not have the same maybe knowledge or experience, when it comes to biomechanics and stuff like what's actually happening like underneath the skin, and those forces are like for every like inch. So, anyways, I'm just kind of unloading my thoughts on you, but in terms of like how the standard might affect the lifter's health and safety, I don't know if you've kind of thought about that or have any like ideas or commentary on from that standpoint. Because I know we always talk about the sport and the records, but I think there's other layers to this outside of just the records themselves.
Yeah. So we don't see as many injuries in untested, right? Like tested lifters. We just in the IPF, we see long-term injuries, right? We don't see the short term, right? We don't see the major short-term injuries as often as you see and like untested. And there's reasons for that, right? In my opinion, you know, when it comes to PDs and things like that, of course, they push you beyond your genetic limit, right? And our body has a weird way of just kind of limiting ourselves what we are and what we are not capable of. That's why we have our genetic outliers who are just capable of crazy things. And then you have a person who will never squat more than 500 in their life, no matter how hard they try. And that's a legitimate thing. Like, there is science to back that up, that there are just we have certain limitations when it comes to our natural ability. Now, we're not an infinitely scaling mechanism, right? So we can inch and inch and inch always toward that 100% limit and not make any more progress or make very marginal progress, right? It's like a tractor pull, right? You just start making a ton of progress and all of a sudden it starts digging into the dirt and eventually you kind of just you can probably keep hopping and going, but until you run out of traction, right? And that's what untested powerlifting kind of circumvents, right? So when we start looking at injuries in longevity, you just don't see the same type of injury over on the untested side. You see more career ending back injuries, longevity things that's not going to make training that way sustainable anymore. And you see those people fall off and they fall off permanently and they know it, and it's kind of that's their culture, right? You see them kind of just make their graceful exit. You don't see them make like the John Hack graduation gradual change to the untested side, where then all of a sudden they just kind of take off and blow up, right? And so on the untested side, you have these catastrophic injuries, right? And the thing is, that's why we got to wait. The combo rack, you get away with the combo rack so much over on the tested side is because even with their crappy spotting and loading or spotting sometimes, with how bad that is,
Yeah.
it's they're just not as catastrophically prone as they are to the untested side because the untested side is pushing beyond genetic limitation, right? It's pushing at such an astronomical pace, or you're just blowing major bones or
Yeah.
muscles off the bone, right? I had a client at Power Surge. He walked out all prep, and then he just on meet day decided to just switch to a mono because he was a little unstable feeling, and then all of a sudden, at the moment he switched to the mono, he blew his patella tendon, right? So there's good and bad to it. I think training with a monolift is safer. Um, the only argument I honestly see as anything valid in that respect is that it is safer and it is better in every way, shape, or form for the lifter safety, lifter capability, and to maximize their ability to perform. It provides options for people who want to walk out if they want to. Um, I've not met one person who ever said that setting up in a monolift as opposed to a combo rack was harder
Right.
because it's more free floating. You can get under the bar, like you're not getting obstructed by the arm the arms. And when you walk out, you're not slamming against like the stanchions. So when it comes to that, you know, it's safer. The only argument that's valid about against a monolift is it's harder on the meat director. It's harder to move around. It's
The
harder
sweat.
to
Yeah.
That's it. Like that's the only thing. Monoliths are vastly superior in every way, shape, or form when it comes to overall meat quality. The only thing that they have yet to solve is making it applicable to a bench. And that was it. Like if you find a way to like make a monolift and where you just don't have to move it until deadlift, right? But then you have to go back to a bench, and so there's the inconvenience factor where it's like combo rack, you can just do all squat and bench and you're done, right? And that's really the only argument in that. I'll push a person to a mono 10 times out of 10, especially on the untested side,
Yeah.
because I can just simply, it sounds really bad. I can abuse it. If I can teach a person not to walk out, I'm going to put 2 to 5% on their squat. That's it. Like it's like teaching someone to squat in wraps versus like squat in sleeves. I'm going to put pounds on your lift once you learn how to use it and learn how to abuse it.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you've seen I guess it's TDE equipment with the AB. So they have kind of like this hybrid,
Yes, seen one in
which
person actually.
I'm excited to anyways, little side tangent. I don't know if you watched or were familiar with Strongman at the Arnold maybe like 2-ish years ago when they did the squat event. And
Yes.
so anyways, that type of setup, and again, it wouldn't really be maybe necessarily easier to move that, but that type of setup was really intriguing for me because of many factors. But in terms of the safety aspect, I also really liked because it has since essentially it's a monolith in a rack, it had horizontal straps. So that would kind of also be, better, I guess mechanically, maybe that'd be the right way to put it. And what I was thinking was if from a squatting standpoint, you can kind of get your safety strap height very easily, like you do like your face saver height on a bench. And I think also from a standard standpoint, if you were able to like the judges see like, okay, your height, your safety height is number 6. You have someone use their competition form with like an unloaded bar. I know it's not perfect because center of mass and all these things, but you can kind of get a reference point of how low that person is in relation to like it's another visual marker I think potentially could help in terms of like making sure there's consistency and like the depth calls from your opener to second to third. And then I had actually reached out to Rogue, and again, I'm not I don't think I'm anyone to Rogue personally, but I did reach out to say, hey, it'd be great if you can kind of just make some sort of pop-in bench for that particular rack. And I thought that would be an unbelievable option, but they never kind of did anything with it, and they were just happy to kind of just sell the monolift as is. But I think that the hard something like that where it's also easy to Because like when you have the safety strap like over the monolift, obviously it's a little bit cumbersome if you're kind of working with the chains. If you were kind of like, I know like a lot of times I see at meets where if someone's walking out, they just like, all right, we're just taking the the safety strap off, which I understand why they do that, but it's like kind of one of the points of having a monolift is having that added layer of protection. So anyway, I think that'd be great if we could start to kind of push towards technology that's going to allow to increase the safety of the lifter. Just because things happen, like you said, especially on the untested side. Sometimes someone tears a quad, someone tears an adductor, and there's only so much a spotters can do at that point. If something blows like that, like a big muscle like that, um, you know, I think we've all seen and we've had lifters where the spotters just don't quite get there in time, and then it's like that lifter's out of the meet, and hopefully they're able to come back, but. We've seen some
Right.
catastrophic, like you said, career ending stuff, and sometimes people try to come back, and sometimes they're kind of done. So
So I was there at the abs rumble when Kyle dumped his last squat. And I spoke on it a little bit and I said that if you look at like how like the bruising on his leg and where he was at, like if he doesn't dump that bar, and I believe this with all every ounce of
yeah,
conviction, and I'm a stay with the bar type of guy. Um, if he doesn't dump that bar, he ends his entire career.
yeah,
He's at the hospital, he's getting his stuff reattached. He's probably to sitting today just keeping his legs up in an immobilizer and uh, dealing with probably, a couple lateral quad detachments, probably a broken patella, and then probably a detached adductor magnus and torn hamstring, right? So, and he's surgery, and then he can't, he's not going to be viable in bodybuilding anymore because his symmetry on his legs are going to be
yeah,
completely hosed from surgery, and he's not going to be a competitive powerlifter anymore because he simply just aren't going to come back from that. I don't know anyone who's really ever came back from major knee blowouts. Ken Cooper did a little bit, but he's not the same.
no,
And none of them are. Like Brandon Lilly tried to come back and 15 surgeries later realized he could never do it. Um, so the reality is I've seen that like with abs, like, they stress under they pride themselves in those standards and you know what you're getting into going there. So, I mean, I did the meet in the regional here in February, and I was very hyper vigilant about my depth, where I knew depth was, and I have a great command of my own personal depth. I just went even deeper. I made a point. It's a point to prove, and I ended up going to Ghost Clash and mimicking the same depth, and they're like, "You don't have to go that deep, dude. Like you literally don't." Like I buried my squats, and that was kind of the point of contention with Heidi when it came to that too. But like,
yeah,
we have big guys like that squatting that deep, and with combo racks, the only thing you really that's good about a combo rack is that it's not going to be in the way when you go down, right? And that's really the only benefit of it. It ain't going to save you from crap.
no,
Even if you try to dump it or something like that, you're going to flip it. Those things aren't big enough and they're not fast and down enough. Those end up flipping the combo rack if you had some sort of squat saver or something on it. They just don't have enough weight behind.
yeah. So I know you kind of mentioned Heidi is a good example where and we can kind of talk specifics or just kind of. So I think squat depth it's been like a topic of conversation since the dawn of time, right? From the
Oh
multiply
yeah.
days to now, and someone that also kind of came from that West Side era and background, and having spent time with Lou, and for those that may or may not know about Heidi's own accomplishments, world records and all, one of the, I want to say she's still like top three multiply of all time for the women, or she's up there.
Yeah.
Um, and then it's like kind of, regardless of what you think about equipped lifting or not, I think obviously she understands like what the rules are, what the standards are, and all these different things. Um, you know, I've kind of seen over the years there's been such a variance in from federation to federation, from meet to meet, to what's asked of the lifter. And I don't know if like always going like lower and lower and lower is the answer, like either in terms of squat depth and even with like benching. it was my understanding, and I don't know if this is maybe like I heard this from Mark Bell or whatever, like a lot of the press commands was really just to kind of make sure that the lifter knew that the barbell actually made contact with your bench shirt and like it wasn't necessarily like supposed to be like a 2 second pause or it was to kind of okay because a lot of times the bench shirt's going to stop the bar for you anyway. It was just to kind of make sure okay you made contact, now you have kind of permission to press away kind of thing. And then with the deadlift lockouts is another thing where there were in like the early 2000s and stuff there were certainly some sketchy soft lockouts and stuff like that, but I've also kind of seen where especially for some bigger individuals, not to like everyone's, has advantages and disadvantages, but I think sometimes like at a certain weight, it's like how straight can your knees be? How like arched should your back be on like a 900-pound deadlift? And then there's your body weight to weight ratio. And there's just all sorts of factors where like I think that like me personally, I'd almost like to see a little bit of a maybe I don't know if looser is the right word, but a more reasonable standard that's also consistent that people like can agree on. I think in some federations, in some instances, I feel like we've almost gone like too like far like the other way to kind of like combat maybe some of like the high multiply squats that we've seen and stuff like that. So, but I would like to just see more consistency across the board, just like powerlifting at lot. So I'm not sure like what your thoughts are with like the whole like judging, where we should be go. How can we like make this more consistent? How can we make this like where most people kind of agree this is what a squat is, this is what a bench is, this is what a deadlift should look like in competition.
Yeah. So what's funny is bench, uh, as it pertains to a Paralympic sport, is no different than Olympic lifting. There are no commands except the down or slash rack command. In Paralympics, there's no press command.
It's
You
extremely
unrack it.
extremely difficult.
Yeah, you unrack it, you show control, you press it, you pause it, and then you're done. Once you're done, you're given a rack command by the official. And that's the only thing that they do in Paralympics, right? And then they decide if it's a good lift, much in the degree of like clean and press and snatch, they give you a down and then they give you whether or not you executed it within the rule book. They look at the entire lift as its entirety, not a segmented thing. And we, to my knowledge, I've had some older colleagues who've been in this sport since forever.
Yeah.
And some of the early days of powerlifting, I have talked to people the early days of powerlifting, like early days of powerlifting, it was more like Olympic lifting. There were no commands. The commands were simply quality of life improvements because you had people saying, hey, give me a press command, right? Kind of like how we have modern day like multiply, back, most likely take it, but squat. But like,
Yeah.
it's one of those same things. It's like they just didn't know where they're at and they didn't want to have to think about that. So that it was a quality of life improvement to add those commands, right? Because judging holistically is super, super easy. If a person just walks out and I say, hey, all you're going to get is a rack command, you're not getting a start command, you're not getting all you get is a rack command. Your job is to do everything yourself and perform it to the rule book. And um, people would probably falter with that pretty quick, right? Because they wouldn't read the rule book. They wouldn't know that they have to be super, and then also to a degree for safety reasons, right? But if you look at deadlift just has one command. In my opinion, they really should all just have one command, right? Bench should have one command. Squat should have one command. Now, that does it inherently make things unsafe or less safe? Yeah, probably, but it's one of those things like the judging, the standards is more focused on those things. So we've added more process to that is basically what I'm saying. When it comes to squat depth, honestly, we're just not improving. We're not advancing ourselves. We're not improving. The numbers are going up, but we're not coming up with real solutions on what we could potentially do. We have all these cameras, we have all these things.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking about it yesterday, like my velocity meter has a range of motion metric to it, right? And I did a lot of playing with it, right? A lot of side videos of my squat and stuff. And I realized like my depth, and I cross-referenced, my depth is 21.3 inches. That is where depth is for me. I'm a judge. Like I am a judge. It's judged multiple all-time world records. I done it, so I have a pretty good understanding where depth is. Like I sat there and I looked over like 40 of my own personal videos, looking at my hip crease and how I did that, and I just did a cross reference with my velocity meter, and it was always 20.3, 21.3, 21.3, 21.3 every single time. There was a little bit of deviation, so now you can add standard deviation to that,
Right.
but like that those that exists. Now you can have human eyesight as saying, but like if a person's like, if you know, like during the check-in process,
Well, so that's what I was going to say, and I don't mean to cut you off because
no, no, you're good.
but so I think that's a really good point as far as to make it, now you're making this subjective thing more objective, right? So then,
Exactly. And the thing is, we have so much subjectivity right now of what people believe squat depth is. And go ahead and finish your thing. I have one more thing on to add on to that because it's a capability
sure.
stuff.
So I think that because yeah, so something like that would not be overly, it wouldn't necessarily be overly I guess more time consuming, for like, okay, so like you get your face saver height, you get your rack height, you go, okay, all right, so now we're going to attach this like tethering unit to the bar, and then we're going to agree on, okay, like this is how I squat, okay, this is the amount of meters, whatever, or inches, whatever it is. So like, and there's going to be a threshold, and okay, as long as you meet that threshold, then you're not going to get dinged for depth. And I think that would be like, and then it's also like one less thing that the judges don't even have to like, they could look for other stuff. They could look for, because and then, it comes to like the spotting thing where if you like, from a safety standpoint, I feel like half the time, sometimes you can't even like, can you even see like what's going on when there's a 5-person crew and it's a multiply lifter and there's knee wraps and there's a canvas suit and the guy's 400 pounds and they're squatting, it's like, what are we looking, you know what I mean? It's like, where's the hip crease at that point? If you have a wrapped lifter, like where is the knee joint start? Like so anyways, just I'm kind of, again, now I'm getting into ranting mode, but yeah, having just some sort of hard number would be great, where it's just like, did you hit the number or like not? You know?
There's no squat call on the planet that's ever been done in history that isn't subjective. It's true. And to this degree, it is harder to give a red light than it is to give a white light. And this is where we fall apart. And I look at judges and their capabilities. So when I looked at, and I'm going to say this is going to get me a lot of hate probably, but I honestly don't care. When I looked at the judges on Heidi's lift,
Yeah.
I don't know two of them. I know one of them. And I'm just sitting there. I'm like, okay, this is 2-1. I look at each one of those judges and I don't know their accolades, but I look at a judge like, are you capable of making that call? Are you actually capable of giving that definitively a red light within your field of vision? Do you have that capability? Because there are people in this sport, judges, state judges, like a lot of state judges, like first year judges, when they're sitting in the chair and they're like looking at a really hard, tough call,
Mm.
right? A really tough lifter to judge. I'm going to expect that lifter to give a lot of white lights. And here's why. They are currently not capable. They
Mm.
don't have their eye trained. They don't have enough experience to definitively give that a red light with 100% certainty. Because if it's not 100% certain, that means it's at least 99.9% like certain. In other words, zero point 0.1 uncertain, therefore it's a white light. White light. Any amount of uncertainty is an automatic white light because of benefit of the doubt of the lifter.
So let me ask you, do you believe that that is like the consensus philosophy of like every like kind of judges, because again, in my opinion, there's like that's every time I have a conversation, we always say that you're innocent until proven guilty, but that's not always how I view things in real life in certain, and again, I don't want to say it's not any one federation, but you can see certain judges tend to like, like they want to like almost, it's like a power thing. And I
Yeah.
guess that comes down to the meet director, right? But um But yeah, no, I'm with you. It's like if you can't definitively say I saw this infraction, then you give the lifter the benefit of the doubt. And I just don't know if that's always taught. And I think that that's I don't know.
Agree.
I think that needs to be harped on a little bit more from, you know, the federation directors to the meet directors down and whoever's doing like the judges training. Cause yeah, that's kind of like what we always say, but again, it's not always I so really quick aside, again, just kind of venting is I feel like, we could all kind of put grumpy attached to our Instagram handles at some point, but I had a lifter one time, tested, fed, whatever. She is really short femurs, big girl. She had like 1,000 pound total. Really, she was, top ranked at the time, and she was a very like more of a dive bomb type squatter, and they gave her red lights. Like, it was too fast. I couldn't see it. That was the response that we got from, and it's just like, okay, it's like, should the lifter have to cater towards, you know, I don't know. So, anyways, it's just a little side note, which it's frustrating sometimes. Because again, I hate to see a lifter. Again, if it's a borderline call and you're not sure, like, I don't know. I always think, like, give the lifter the benefit of the doubt. And if I'm judging at a local meet personally, I'll kind of pull that lifter aside. Hey, I gave you a white on this one. This was a little bit like, borderline. Just try to make the adjust. So like I'll try to go out of my way at like the meets that we do, the local ones especially, just to try to like have some teachable moments. So if they do go to maybe a fed that maybe is more, they have their light set on red. Maybe they're just also a little bit more prepared, or if they got, like, hey, this was kind of this was kind of like maybe about to be ramped. Maybe try to, like, let's work toward improving your lockout on the next one, and then and if it gets worse, then at least they're aware. So I'm not sure if that's something, but at least especially on the local level, because I think that if you kind of start to educate the lifters like early on, there's like no surprises. When you get to these pro meets. And, another thing I'll just kind of say too, sometimes, like, I talked about this with Jordan Wong. I think outside of consistency, I think it's really important to try your best to be unbiased when you're in the chair, that you almost like, you don't, it's just an object that you're judging versus, so I don't know. These are just some other things I just wanted to kind of throw out there in terms of, and we can kind of go through bench and deadlift
Right.
as well. But I do think that it's like really important that there is a very clear communication process when we're kind of training these officials, and that we all start to kind of work towards, I guess, a common expectation for what warrants a red light, what warrants. So, anyways, I know there's like a lot there, but and I'm trying to, so I hope I didn't
No,
throw you off track, but
it, so the PLU put in the card system, right? Just like the IPF, USAPL, et cetera, right? And I thought that was a good move because it gives transparency of like what your infractions are without
yes.
having to run down the judges, and it forces the judges to actually give a definitive call and not just kind of throw a red and then go off into the ether. One natural evolution to that particular style of judging is to extend it to benefit of the doubt. We all too often say, hey, what this is bad, this is your infraction. But what if like you're borderline?
Mm,
What if you're close, right? It's like, hey, you got a white light but a red card, or you got a white light but a yellow card
okay.
or a blue card
Yes.
or whatever. And it's like, hey, what was that card for? Right? It's I gave you benefit of the doubt,
Mm,
but I gave you benefit of the doubt. So you got the white light because it was inconclusive, but you're really flirting with it, right? Because
got it.
if I see that again, or see it higher, or I see
Mm,
it, you know, way less, something to that effect, because they really don't capture the non-technical infractions and the warnings and stuff. So it's like, you know, equipment touching the bar or something, you give a white light, but then like a blue card or whatever because of equipment infraction or whatever. But like we're kind of just kind of stagnant in how we judge this sport, and we're not evolving it. And I think, like you said, from a training standpoint, is like we only tell people what they're doing wrong. We can help them when it's a positive things like, hey, you got the lift. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, but you're still like you're flirting with depth. You're flirting with, you know, uh, heaving or whatever, or even a soft knees,
Sure.
right? And so, because the thing is, there is that third entity. It's not, it's good, bad, and then there's maybe, but maybe sits on the side of of yes. So we like, and it boils down to capabilities of that judge. A lot of 1, 2, 3, 4 year judges don't have the capability of making that definitive call. And, in case of like Hussam or Heidi in Hussam's calls, like you had two national judges, I believe, sitting in that chair, you know, they probably gave benefit of the that side judge gave
Sure.
benefit of the doubt, but it was three whites. So
Yeah.
chances are you have an like a state judge who's probably not too familiar with it. Sees a big name lifter. He's like benefit of the doubt. I couldn't like I saw it, but I wasn't sure. And then you have a right side judge. He's like, hell, I don't know. Like, and they literally, it probably went down, and the head judge never calls depth from the front anyway, right? At least in America.
I was gonna say,
Um,
except
except abs and the IPF and stuff like that.
that's one of the
Which I
most infuriating things. But again,
think
it's
is a
that's
trough. Nick Forte got called for depth from the front, and I didn't really care because I was like, yeah, you were high, like on the side, but like I look at it like whenever a front head judge calls depth from the front, I'm just like, why do you not trust your judges? Like, why don't you trust your side
yeah,
judges?
it's that's not like, well, again, and again, I don't know, like, because I'm not too familiar with the ABS rule book specifically, but like I know like what is that particular's judge front side whatever, like what are the infractions that they should be looking for, right?
Oh, it's the
So
IPF. It's just the IPF rule book.
it's the
Just
IPF rule book. Yeah,
it's the IPF rule book. Just kind of amended a little bit to kind of give some untested quality of life. Like you can be on your feet, but your head still has to be down, which I think is an absolute.
I don't understand the purpose of
The
the.
head, the head's immaterial, but you can let the feet up. Like, come on. Um, but the reality of it is like, you know, what abs signifies to me is as is like the closest untested powerlifting is ever going to get to the IPF.
Yeah.
And it should stay like that. It honestly should, because the US has way too many feds, way too many things,
Yeah.
and them coming over here has been a valiant attempt, in my opinion. I think like Virginia is going to honestly going to feel more like an American USA type meet because Zach's running it. And it's running on specialty bars, and
Yeah.
it's going to have American flair to it, right? It's not purely going to be. It's kind of not going to be like the quintessential abs meet that you're used to. Like I invested my last year into it with Zach, and I went over to Ireland. I did both rumbles. I did the regional myself. And I kind of feel like I got the full experience of abs. And there's a few commonalities, and it really just kind of has that IPF feel. Which, if you follow tested powerlifting at all, like those guys are always pissed about the IPF, right? But they have nowhere to go because of Article 14, and they don't have no logical path on a world stage anyway, because IPF is literally the only world stage in powerlifting, period, for like legitimate world titles.
Yeah.
Plus, you have Sheffield. So now what people are missing out on paydays. And typically, a lot of those SBD lifters who are sponsored by SBA are getting couple $2,000-3,000 a month anyway, and kickbacks from SBD. So like their entire livelihood, or a good chunk of their livelihood, exists in the IPF. So they can get completely rolled and disrespected, and they just got to sit there and take it. Because but we see that the thing is with those judging and hard lessons, and you squat clearly to depth and still get red lights from the judges and the IPF, you have to understand that behavior kind of to a degree will transpose over to abs, because a lot of those referees on abs are IPF judges, or were IPF judges. They can't be IPF judges and ab judges because of Article 14, but like they all came up in that culture. Jay, the owner of abs, he was an IPF coach. Like he was that whole, like they're all influenced by the IPF because that's all they had. right? And so that's respectable. If you know where they're coming from, you understand it. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, right? Like you get a person like Heidi who she comes from West Side. Like all she had to do, like I always give her crap about that. It's like all you had to do is bend your knees. And then Louis would look at the judges and be like, that's good. And you'd get good, good white lights, right? Like to actually having to squat to depth. And like we spent 12, 16 weeks walking out, doing things she's never done before to get to that point and get to that lift, only to have it taken away.
Yeah.
Like that's tough.
That's really tough. And that's like I feel and that's like where like I think that like if there is, and I don't know, it's just like one of those things where I guess it takes one federation to maybe like be the pioneer, if you will, to try to like, because I feel like we have like you said, something like an OVR or whatever, or like these, we have technology that could like help us with some of these subjective judging, things. And I think that like to your point, like we kind of mentioned, about just letting the officials just observe the lift. I do think it gets to the point where um there's when you have more human involvement in the lift, you have if the official is more involved with the lift, whether it's commands or anything else, it gets every kind of other command or whatever, it makes it a little bit more difficult to be consistent from lift to lift. And even so this is like a quick aside too. So like um I've kind of dabbled in like almost every strength sport you could, outside of weightlifting. I was doing kettlebell lifting for like just a very short stint just to kind of like learn it. And they had some of these devices where basically the terminology that they would use for kettlebell lifting is that they want the kettlebell to be fixated. Essentially, it comes to a dead stop. And they would kind of beep once it's fixated, and it would kind of count your reps for you. Um, so, it's like one of those things where are there like ways to kind of make squat depth more objective? Are there ways to kind of make a bench pause, more objective? And then the deadlift lockouts for me, just kind of being a bigger guy too, has always been like I gotta I did I'm trying to think. I think it was a PLU meet at Travis's gym last year, and this one side referee just gave me a red light every single time, and just my knee is not going to get any straighter, and it's just so I didn't care because I got two, and at this stage in my game, I'm like I'll take two, like I'm
Right.
good, but it's just like one of those things where um like there's been literally no difference, and like I'm not gonna hyperextend my knee, and hurt myself. So I don't know if there's any other kind of like things outside of squat depth that you have ideas or want to touch on, but I just wanted to those are just kind of some things that I see where it's I think that those are I'd say the squat depth, pauses on bench, and like the lockout position on deadlift are things that I feel like have maybe got taken a little bit too far in not every single federation, but just in some of the whether it be pro meets or some of these that's just kind of my observation from over the years.
So one thing I have seen also is like bench press like pauses. The subjectivity of bench press pauses is up there with like the subjectivity of squat. Like in my opinion, I think probably the biggest complaint I have is pauses. I don't think we should have a press command. I don't. I really don't. I think you should have a start and a rack. And it should honestly mimic squat. There should be only five total commands in all of powerlifting, which is squat, rack, start, rack, and down. That's it, right? Like, and you're done. That's how simple this is because the pause on bench is so subjective.
Yeah.
And more often than not, people do not um, accurately uh, judge the heave or they judge it in a different way. So for me, I'm what you'd consider a quick press command person. And they're like, oh man, you give too fast a press command. It's like there is no stipulation in any rule book on how fast a pause can be. Motionless means motionless for any given amount of time. The human delayed response is at least 2/10 of a second, right? So if you happen to be the elite of elite, like F1 racer response time, then you can get one at 2/10 of a second. But everyone else is going to take like
Yeah.
a second and a half, right? So you put that in perspective, it's you're not allowing to accurately judge that lift. So a person, they stop on their chest, they make contact with their chest, that in itself is a pause. The moment they make contact with the chest, that's a pause. Letting it settle into their chest and go down, okay, cool. Like it just that there's too much subjectivity in that rule set where it's like let them handle when it has settled as
Mhm.
opposed to the judge having to guess when it's settled, right? So it hits their chest and maybe they're a soft toucher, maybe they're a heave bencher or something to that effect. And it's just like, I have a lifter that's just like they're big and it just drops it on their chest. It'll stop eventually, but not 9 times out of 10, like if you just say, hey, it has to be paused, and you put the burden of responsibility on them to pause it, it's a lot easier to execute that lift. Imagine if you had an up command on squat. You'd have people searching for it,
Mhm.
right? You'd have people searching for it. And it's the same thing on like you see a lot lately. Like I watched a lifter out at the WRPF regional literally get frozen on her chest because she's just sitting there and like she just eventually just collapsed and they took it after like 5 seconds of pausing because the person was like, well, it's going back and forth. And I'm like, it's not moving. She's struggling to like long pause it.
Yeah.
Right. And like it was absurd, absolute absurdity. And I'm like, that's just not the play. And you can see a lot of people do that. And I'm like, hey, like you have to get people to sit here and like unreasonably pause just to be able to do that. So I think that's probably my biggest complaint about overall like rule sets in powerlifting. I think that honestly, the press command on the pause and the press command on bench honestly should just there should only be rules to keep you safe, not influence the quality of the lift. That's my opinion.
Yeah. So with the start command, because that was something where when we started to shift over from, you know, IPA, SPF, kind of wild, wild west, and then we kind of moved
Right.
towards like RPS. We had to kind of wait for, because there was a lot of soft, especially in equipped lifting, there was a lot of soft handout type stuff.
Right.
So that was kind of like,
You write it out.
yeah. And then you're kind of like, and then you just kind of hope to God that, the person doesn't dump it on their stomach. So I kind of like understood, like, and then we had guys sometimes that certain federations, the mono hooks would like come out and they would just go down, and it's just like, okay. But yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense that you're showing control of the weight, and then it's up to the lifter to kind of move the bar from point A to point B within the standard. Um, I do want to be mindful of your time. Is there any other I guess topics you'd like to kind of touch on before we close out, or any like kind of advice that you have for kind of people getting involved in the sport? In my opinion, I feel like there's like it gets really confusing because there's so many federations, people don't know where to start. What advice would you kind of give to maybe a newer lifter or coach that's trying to navigate this crazy world that we live in powerlifting nowadays?
Yeah, for sure. Last thing I would say though is I was an impeccable soft handoff person. It was, you keep the hands up, you keep the hands up, and you keep the thumbs under. You're like, I'm backing away. I'm backing away. It's just literally, it's just like they're already like a quarter down, and your hand's still on it, giving them support. It was brutal. Like it was so good. It's like putting Vaseline on a curveball. It's just great. Uh, yeah. So powerlifting is in a weird time, right? This sport expands and contracts like a lung. And I really feel like we're in that contraction phase. And
Yeah.
what that means is that it expands and everything expands at the widest level. So the top end level, the top 1%. And what we see in modern social media it's not representative, in my opinion, of what true powerlifting is. And I encourage anybody who's in this sport, whether you're a coach, whether you're an athlete, real powerlifting resides at the local level. Get into your community and your local community. Don't look at nationals. Don't look at pro level meets. Don't look at abs. Like, don't look at that. Don't look at it. Like, that's not, don't look at Sheffield. Like, those are the spectacles. Like, those are cool. That's like, that's like looking past that's like looking past college football and high school football and only looking at the Super Bowl and saying, yep, that's football, but just completely glossing over everything else, right? So it starts at the local level. It starts in, your backyard meets. It starts just having fun, and if you go to a meet and that meet is just full of just sticklers for, standards, they'll just bomb out a 12-year-old just getting into the meet because they aren't controlling the weight or something. It's like, there's got to be a little bit of give and take, right? And get in there. And as a coach, like, get in the warm-up rooms of these local meets. Stop trying to like clout chase and put yourself out on Instagram and all sorts of like, if you want to grow your business, you want to grow it right, do it from the warm-up rooms, right? Do it by talking to people, hearing people. Bring one of your lifters to a meet and show your success through your lifters, right? Get your new lifters out there and it's like, I want to do nationals. So let's do some local meets first. Let's have fun. Like, build that fire, right? Build that fire for the sport and build that love for the sport, and not just, tarnish it with the crazy top 1%. Like, yeah, like people like you and I, we're in the pro scene. We have coached the greatest in the world, right? We have. Like, we're not exactly representative always, but the one thing that you and I have not lost is our local spirit. And that's what makes us different from other coaches, right? Like, we still invest in the local space. We still care about the person who squats 185 pounds when we have people who have squatted 980 pounds, right? So that's the best advice I could give. It's just, in this time, look at like, look small. Look at your local communities. Have fun. Your local powerlifting gyms. Like, have fun. Sometimes it's just, there's still, to this day, being 30 years into this sport, there is still no better lift than just throwing three 45-pound plates on each side and throwing a 315-pound bench around. It is 10 times cooler than loading two reds in a green. I'm sorry, there's nothing cool about 308 as opposed to 315. 314 even is dumb, right? It's two reds, a green, and a silver, right? But three plates, man, that feels good. Clanks. It's like there's just a specific sound to that. So just lift some weights, have fun at the local level, enjoy your community, and if you get strong enough to kind of take it to the national level, do it. But remember where you started. Remember who you are and where you're from, and represent that community and represent it well. That's the best thing I could say.
It's great. I want to throw a couple of things piggyback. So the iron plates thing is so funny because it's like, I got to train on my kilo set. I got to train on my Alico bar, and so we just ran a charity meet like in at our local commercial gym, and it was so nice. It was so nice to just use like steel plates and not have to like work. It was just like and then people like actually know like what's on the bar, and it's just I just got like a little chuckle with that because it's like it's a whole other thing, but I do want to highlight. I do think that like really keeping it local and supporting your local gym and supporting your local meets. And my thing is too, if you have a gripe on like someone's squat depth, and if you have a gripe on, you know, take a judge's course, get in the chair. Like, I just think that like I get really irritated when I see like, you have people that are commenting on, let's say your boys lift, and they're not even like in the sport anymore. It's just like,
I
and
mean,
I'm just, and I'm just, it's just really infuriating. And it's like, I don't know if they're just trying to be relevant still. I don't know, but um, for something that's done so much for me, and it's such a big part of our lives and our family's lives, it's just that kind of stuff really kind of rubs me the wrong way. Where it's like, are you actually trying to like help, or are you just trying to like have your comment be seen? And so that's the kind of stuff. I do stuff in real life, do stuff in person, and I don't know. That's just something that and I'm trying to be like a little bit more vocal. And like I said, you definitely have inspired because I've been like a little quiet these last few months in terms of my stories and stuff, and I prefer like more discussions like this that God forbid someone actually listen to a podcast that's more than 10 minutes, but I think that that's helpful for really kind of unpacking like thoughts and actually kind of like, well, what do I really believe? What do I stand for? What are we trying to do? What's the goal? So those are just some of my thoughts. And I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add, and also like where can people find you and if they want to learn more about
yeah,
you.
you can find me on Instagram. I try to keep it simple. I don't have all these other things. MJ Greeno. Um, and to kind of piggyback off that a little bit, it's always fun because like when you see those high squats pop through, I always typically look for the usual suspects that like make me feel nostalgic. So for Garrett Fear, Jason Mankinoff, and maybe JP, because like those are the original OGs. So everyone else who kind of shows up, it's like, go back and do what you're doing. We don't care. But like I'm like, oh hi boys, like what's up? Like it's good to see you. Like how you been? Because they're just out of it and stuff. Because they're the OGs of the sport who really did kind of
God.
speak on it and stuff. So it's always fun to see them and their flavor to because anymore it's just commentary. They're like, I don't care. I don't have any investment anymore. So that's always fun. But I think for the most part, like you're right. Like it's just we're always going to have these problems until we actually innovate and create something new that'll help this. But it seems people don't have that appetite for that. So we can talk about it. And speaking your mind, arguably I've kind of lost some followers and people listen to me because of some of the things I said. But honestly, I found more people find it useful
Yeah.
to kind of speak things and you just kind of say something with your chest. And if people listen, they listen. But I felt good about it and I'm going to sleep good at night. So is it for them or is it for me? Right? I'm just gonna say my piece and toss it out into the universe. And if someone finds some use for it, great. So, but you can find me on MJ Greeno on Instagram. I'm just kind of around. Uh, yeah. So
I will definitely give Greeno a follow. I appreciate your time. If you guys enjoyed the podcast, please give it a 5-star review and please share it. Helps people find us. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, stay strong and we'll see you soon.